Party the Hat Guy here. Welcome back to another episode of Careers in Baseball, where I am virtually traveling Indiana to interview professionals from all types of careers linked to baseball. Now, before I officially introduce our career professional joining us today, I want to take a second and just read his bio verbatim from online. Denton Sagerman enters his second season in 2020 as a member of the Hoosier baseball staff and his first as Director of Operations and Pitching Development. As Director of Baseball Operations, Sagerman is responsible for budgeting, scheduling, travel coordination, video breakdown, and managing the role of analytics within the program, among other general program operations. Sagerman will also work closely with Associate Head Coach Justin Parker, assisting him with pitch design, video analysis, TrackMan, and Rapsodo in a non-coaching capacity. Prior to Indiana University, Sagerman served as the Director of Baseball Operations at Wright State University under head coach Jeff Mercer, while focusing on analytics and its use in player development at Wright State. Before his role at Wright State, Sagerman, follow me on this now, Sagerman worked as an aerospace engineer at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, specializing in computational fluid dynamics, as well as a varsity coach at Centerville High School. As a student athlete at University of Dayton, Sagerman was a pitcher for the Flyers from 2012 to 2014. Did you catch all that? A collegiate pitcher, a high school coach on the side, while doing, and I had to Google this phrase, computational fluid dynamics for an Air Force base, and then Director of Baseball Operations at two different Division I baseball programs. Yeah, well, I'm a hat collector. So trying to pick apart the career of my guest, Denton Sagerman, might get a little interesting, but I promise to do my best. Coach Sagerman, I really do appreciate you joining me today to talk about your career. I want to look at that bio and break it apart piece by piece and have you fill in the specifics. But as I read it, I can tell you're a guy that likes to keep busy. So I want to start by saying, during this baseball downtime, how you doing? How's the coaching staff doing there at IU? What are you guys doing to keep busy here during this baseball downtime?
Well, good, Dan. Yeah, first off, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. So definitely interesting times that we're in right now, but I think we're doing a good job of making sure we're starting to plan for next year and get everything organized as we can. I think with all this downtime, you can become more efficient and more effective in the way you do different things. So that's kind of what my daily tasks are now, is just doing things for next year and into the future of the program, that we can make sure we're staying on the cutting edge of stuff, and we're ready to kick it off once this thing breaks and we're able to get back to work.
And break it will. We're all hoping for it. It was I got a lot of sympathy for the seniors for your program that aren't moving on. You guys had a great career last year, great season last year, last full season. Sent a lot of guys into the majors. Not all the seniors. Some of the seniors that were on your team this year, their baseball career as a player may be done at this point. As along with all the college players who are seniors across the state and across the country. So it's a kind of a sad scene for sure. A lot of, with baseball being shut down. But your career, like you said, there's no stopping. There's always something to do.
Right.
Your title is Director of Baseball Operations. Like I read in the bio there, a lot of the individual tasks, individual things that you're tasked with in that capacity. But let's back up. Let's talk about, getting to where you're at now. This video series we're doing here is really on non-coaching, or the better way I like to think of it is the careers you don't think about when you think about careers in baseball. So Director of Baseball Operations, not every college has that. Definitely, in my travels, maybe a couple high schools have something like that. So, it's an elite title. Let's go back to Denton Sagerman as a player. Let's go back to your youth. Obviously, you were a good player to play at the Division I level. So, I'm guessing you wanted to stay with baseball, but
Hmm.
there's a lot of technicality in what you do, in your past positions and your current position. Tell us, in growing up from elementary school to high school and then into college, at some point you probably said, okay, I'm going to pursue probably a career in Major League Baseball. But at some point there might have been a realization that if that doesn't happen, what kind of actual career am I going to have? When did that happen? When did you start to say, because I'm looking at computational fluid dynamics for an Air Force base, and I'm looking at the analytics you're doing right now. So I'm talking to a smart person here. A lot of math involved, a lot of
Hmm.
education. When did the two marry each other and say, hey, I can use this skill set that I have, but stay in baseball?
I think it started with my dad owning his own indoor training facility when I was growing up. So he opened that basically just to allow me a place to train. And it ended up being a great environment. He brought in some great coaches, and it was like, this is really cool. This is really awesome. And I think I might want to do this as something long term, because when you see your dad doing it as something when he's older, it's like this is something I really could pursue. Um, but then played growing up, had good success in high school, and then got to the college level and had some success. But you know I always enjoyed thinking of the game in maybe different ways, in an analytical way, and wasn't able to always translate that to the field as well as some of the other players that I played with that went on and was on some really good teams, and was just, hey, I want to do this in some capacity, but I'm not sure if that capacity is playing the game at the highest level that was available. So I thought about the game in different ways, thought about it from a statistical and analytical, a technical perspective. And my major was engineering. So I was like, you know, I think I can find a way to mirror these two and take the skills that I learned in engineering and all that kind of stuff and apply it to baseball. But, like you kind of mentioned, I didn't know of what role that would be in college or professional baseball. I was like, well, it doesn't necessarily fit coaching with an engineering background. So what field um, can I apply my engineering background into the college or professional game? So I kind of put that on the back burner for a little bit. Went full into engineering. Got my bachelor's in mechanical engineering, master's in aerospace engineering, and then was working at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and was like, I'm just coaching on the side. I think I really want to give it a run at seeing if I can apply some of this stuff into baseball full time. So, like a lot of people that are in analytics, it starts with the book Moneyball. I always say, a lot of people say that. I read that book, and it kind of gave me hope that maybe I could apply some of my engineering in a different way. But I more wanted to use Moneyball not as like a scouting perspective, but a player development perspective. So using the stats and technology and data to influence player development, not just scouting, not just who's the best available player, how do we get them, what deficiency do we have in our roster, but more so how do we develop that skill set that we need by the tools that we have. So um, that's kind of how that started. And then, as my playing days kind of ended, I was at a crossroads. I went, to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and worked for a year, and then was like, you know what, I miss baseball too much. I'm going to try to get back into it. So that's where, the internship with Jeff Mercer at Wright State came in, became, their operations person. And then it moved pretty quick. A year later, he got the job here at Indiana and gave me a call. And I still remember getting that call on my phone. I was like, yeah, I used to work for this guy, and we had a really good relationship, and we still stayed in touch a little bit. But I'm like, he just got the job at Indiana. I wonder if this has something to do with that. And yeah, because I had no intentions of moving or no intentions of doing any of that. I was, coaching in the Dayton area, still doing some engineering stuff, but starting to get more into baseball. But I was like, all right, this might be it. So got the call and moved over, and it's been the best decision I've made. So it's been awesome for my career.
Well, I'll tell you what, yeah, I can imagine getting that call from him, and you're going to a Big Ten school to play baseball. But I want to, before that call happened, just tell me, what is computational fluid dynamics? Like, we don't have to go into it big time. That's obviously not
Yeah.
what we're talking about here, but that is it. You talked about your degree was in mechanical and
Hmm.
aerospace engineering
Yep.
combined. Tell me how that led into computational fluid dynamics with, give a hat guy, dumb it down version of what is computational fluid dynamics.
Yeah, so I was working on my undergrad in mechanical engineering with an aerospace focused and doing stuff in our flight simulator we had on campus. So, creating different planes in a simulator, getting to fly them and stuff like that. So it was pretty cool. And then, was at a crossroads. I graduated and there was a graduate opportunity that they would pay for my master's degree in aerospace engineering if I worked at Wright Pat at the same time. So I was like, you know what, I'll prolong like the real world for a little bit. I'll get another degree and I'll keep, get another degree basically for free. So I'll keep doing that. And then just, got to work. So, but yeah, computational fluid dynamics is more so on the, using your computer to model how fluid moves around an object and how it interacts with an object. So you can think of that as how a baseball goes through the air and why it moves, and when it's spinning, why it breaks a certain amount. So that's kind of the baseball application to it, is when a ball is released and it's spinning, there's certain reasons as to why it breaks vertically, horizontally, or whatever. So that's kind of, I guess, but I was doing that from a computer perspective, like how to model that. But at that point, just around, United States Air Force jets and stuff like that.
Well, all kidding aside, it's very interesting to me, and especially the way that you tied it in to baseball there. It's just I love the way your mind works and the whole science of this stuff.
Hmm.
And I just got to throw this out here, that your career may be different. There's another, I've heard there's another pretty good engineering school in Indiana, in the state of Indiana, that Indiana may have heard of, there at IU. Who knows? Dayton, I'm sure they had a great program as well. Just throwing that out there. So, as we move through that, you're also doing, high school coaching while you're doing
Hmm.
that as well in Centerville. That probably had to keep you pretty busy.
Yeah, it was an awesome experience. I'm working with their head coach Jason Whited. What was a great experience. I got to incorporate a lot of the stuff that I learned actually while playing at Dayton. I worked was coached by some really great guys. Matt Tellerico with SteelBases.com was a huge resource and mentor in my life. So I was able to bring that kind of base running system to the high school level and work with their pitchers as well, and just as a general assistant coach. But just being able to try out a lot of the things that I learned from a technical perspective and see how it could influence high school baseball was huge. And I credit Jason for giving me a lot of leeway to test different things and try different things. And, at one of the biggest high schools in the state of Ohio. So we were pretty successful, had some really good players, but it was a great experience, great experience coaching. It was awesome to get back on the field and kind of reunite that love for baseball that I lost a little bit throughout my playing career at Dayton, but kind of got rejuvenated again.
Good, very good. So you've Mercer gives you the call. You come over to IU, and I want to pick apart some of the things like I was talking about earlier that you're tasked with on a
Hmm.
day-to-day basis. But before I do that, you're at IU, a Big Ten school for fans like me. Let's just talk about those cool moments where you're at IU. You mentioned how awesome it was to get the call from Mercer. I'm sure there's
Hmm.
still some moments right now. In our jobs, sometimes we all just have to roll up our sleeves and do the work. But I know there's got to be times where you're saying, "Man, I'm getting paid for this." You're still that kid, and you're
Yeah.
living in that baseball life. So what are some of those moments, like maybe even some of the people that you've got to meet over your time here at IU, as well as just the daily routine or the special events that have said, "Man, I'm in the right place. I made the right decision. I'm loving this."
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the first ones was just meeting Scott Rowland, obviously, who's on our staff, is has a pretty successful Major League Baseball career, and is an absolute amazing guy. He's a great guy to be around. Um, he's humble. He loves to talk the game. He's just a baseball junkie, and he loves to talk the game. So he's been awesome. It was pretty cool to meet him for the first time, and him just talk baseball with me as if I was a colleague, which was pretty cool. So we've developed a good friendship over the years, and all of our coaches on staff, Dan Held, Justin Parker, Casey Dykes, Derek Simmons, all those guys have been great resources, and just being able to realize that you're at the field talking baseball, and that's part of your job now. It's no longer a hobby or something you have to do on the side, or no, that's your job is to make the most comprehensive player development program in the country, which is what we say is our task every single day. So it's pretty cool to realize, like, we're in a meeting talking about baseball or talking about analytics, data, player development, whatever it is. And it's like, I'm getting paid to do this. This is my job. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, but those things, another one is just anytime we go to like a stadium and it's like a, opening weekend at LSU this year. And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
it's like, you sit down and first pitch happens and you realize it's like, this is my job. This is what I get to do. I get to coordinate, how we getting 45 guys from Bloomington, Indiana to Baton Rouge, Louisiana is fun. So that part's really cool. That never fades. That hasn't faded for me yet. And every single day when you're at practice or whatever you're doing, it's like that. This is pretty cool. This gets to be your job.
I'll tell you, yeah, you're painting the picture for me, and I'm jealous for sure.
Yeah.
Before we get into these specific tasks, let's take one more revisit at your education and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and look at a broad scope educational educational opportunities that are out there at colleges that you're aware of that lead to positions that do what you do. Your background is in engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back where you are now, are there other routes you could have taken? If you're talking to a high school kid right now, what
Yep.
other routes are there that could get you to where you are today?
Yeah, I would say my route is not traditional for the role that I'm in right now, for sure. People ask me this a lot because of the background is like, what do you think is most prevalent? Like, what do you need to get into your role or whatever? And I, it's kind of ironic that I say this, but I'm not the biggest fan of like degrees and thinking that degrees are the way you get there. All this is coming from someone that has 3. But I don't think those things are generally necessary to get into these roles. I think that's a misconception kind of in all of industry these days, is that I need X degree to get to the X position in a job that I want. I think more prevalent is identifying the skill sets in the job that you want and developing those skill sets. And sometimes that happens through a degree path, but a lot of that can happen by self-motivation and doing things on your own. So that's where I always say, they say, what did you get out of engineering? How does it apply to your job now? It's like, it's problem solving. Becoming a problem solver was the number one thing that I got from engineering. I don't necessarily remember every equation that we ever did. I don't remember every assignment, all those types of things. And I think that's probably similar for a lot of people in their careers, but I remember the steps I took in my process to solve problems. And that's what I have to do every single day here is solve problems. So I think identifying skill sets that your future job would entail, and then how do I best develop those skill sets, and not looking at it from a degree standpoint is probably the most beneficial. And like I said, problem solving and organization are the 2 skills that I learned, and it took me 6 years throughout my degrees to learn, but now those are directly helping me in my everyday career path. So for someone that's trying to get into it, it's like, if you see a problem or something that interests you in the baseball industry, go out and try to solve that problem yourself and document your process, and then present that to a future employer, or create a blog or something like that, where you're solving real world problems that are in the industry that you see. If it's right or wrong, it's kind of irrelevant. It's more the process you follow to show that you're dedicated and you really have an interest in it. And someone is then going to be like, okay, I might hire this person. And then now with all of these resources, I can't imagine what they can do if they could do all of this on their own without the resources we have here.
That's good stuff right there. And that reiterates a common theme in some of these career videos I'm taking right now is, don't the traditional route that people think is traditional. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think the common knowledge now that, get a 4-year degree, then you're going to go right into the job that you're going to have for the rest of your life
Right.
is really not really the norm. I don't have
Right.
research to back that up, but I think it's pretty a common understanding of things. But what I'm what I'm hearing from you, and a common theme is, don't wait for that degree. The degree is not the starting point to get started.
For sure.
You get started early within whatever your passion is,
Mm-hmm.
and figure it out. I like what you were saying right there. Find a problem and then figure it out, and then
Mm-hmm.
document it. I mean, there's some
Yep.
specific steps there that I'm just highlighting of what you said, because I think they were so important and so well said, which is find the problem that, within your scope of interest,
Mm-hmm.
find a way to solve that problem and document it and then present it, use
Mhm.
that to get you in the door.
Mhm.
There's, obviously there's, connections and networking and things like that involved, but
Mhm.
showing that you have that interest to do the work. And I love the point that you made there, that he's doing this without any resources. He's doing this
Mhm.
on his own. If we give him the resources, look what he could do.
Yeah.
And that's what that's also saying, is that work ethic, that
Mhm.
he's putting in, he's rolling up his sleeves and he's doing this on his own time. So, I mean,
Right.
those are great points right there,
Yep.
that you made. So let's look at where you're at currently. Again, some of the things that this is just from the website
Mhm.
listed, that are all part of baseball operations, which is budgeting, scheduling, travel coordination, video breakdown and analytics. And then I want to, kind of something you probably wouldn't think I would highlight, but the one that says other general program operations. That tells me right there, that's a wild card that
Yeah.
says, if something needs done, Denton Sagerman is going to get it done, right
Right.
there. And then I also want to talk about some of the technologies that
Mhm.
that are listed on there: the TrackMan, the Rapsodo. Um, let's pick these apart. Let's look at, you talked about the game at LSU, which that was,
Mhm.
I had that one on my calendar for, watching well in advance. I'm like, oh man, IU opening up down there against LSU.
Yeah.
This is going to be big time. There's a lot going on behind the scenes there, that
Mhm.
to make that happen. And I'm not just
Right.
talking scheduling.
Right.
Baseball, it's not the football program. It's not,
Mhm.
in a lot of Big Ten schools, it's not the basketball program as far as the budget. Now,
Yep.
uh, so you're in charge of budgeting, and that's one component that, the math, and you definitely have the background in math. That math has to add up,
Right.
to make it work. And then we go into travel coordination. All of
Mhm.
those things. Talk to me about that. Let's use that LSU game as an example, maybe for the travel coordination, but for the budgeting, let's just look at the big picture, and say, how's that work? When you're talking budgeting, are you also looking into uh, um, fundraising, as far as, any method, or let's talk budgeting specifically, for example? What is your role as budgeting at IU?
Yeah, so we have like a general, as every school does, a general operating budget that we have to confine to, and then also an equipment budget. So kind of two separate things. So it's more so just being like, these are our projected trips for the year, and this is how much we have to spend on each trip is what it comes down to. So um, that's hotels, bus, food, flights if there is a flight, anything like that, and then there's some miscellaneous costs as well. So how do we get those 5 or 6 prongs of a trip to be within a certain dollar amount? So there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. There's a lot that's adjustable, and there's a lot that happens on the fly when you're down somewhere and it's like, hey, we this game gets canceled, this game gets moved, we have to change this meal to this time, we have to add an additional meal here. There's a lot of stuff that happens with that, but it has to fit within that budget for that weekend. So that's kind of a lot of the budget stuff that I do, as well as on the equipment side. What's our equipment orders for the year? What do we need? Um, bats, gloves, apparel. Obviously, we have a great Adidas contract, but just different things like that. How do we budget for all of our equipment, and then on a trip by trip basis, there's a dollar amount that we have to stay within, and how do we best utilize those dollars to kind of get the most bang for our buck.
And on that budgeting side of it, who are some of the people or groups that you have to work with? Be it at IU itself,
Hmm.
or maybe alumni associations, or sponsors, or who are some of the other people that you're working with, in the budgeting process at IU?
So our budget kind of gets set between, we have a meeting between myself, Jeff, our head coach, and then our sports administrator. So kind of just to set a budget of what we think. Here's our projected trips for the year. Here's kind of the cost of traveling to each place based off where I use how I use traveled to those different places in the past. What typical flights are, what's the cost of like eating in those areas. So we kind of develop an operating budget at the beginning of the year, and then I work with our travel agent pretty closely on the actual scheduling of the flights, the hotels, the rental cars, the buses, that kind of stuff. So kind of choose which one we want to do, how many people we have, what times we want to fly out, all that kind of stuff. And then she handles kind of the actual booking of that stuff. But those are kind of the main people that I work with for the budget.
As kind of a side, question, and not necessarily limited to budget, but there are other people at IU with your position for other sports.
Hmm.
Do you work? Do you have a relationship with them where you guys kind of help each other out with certain dilemmas or anything like that? How's that relationship work?
Yeah, it's great. I think, I text the other operations people all the time, like, hey, we have a big visit coming up. Can I borrow your golf cart? Something like that. So we trade golf carts all the time. So just different stuff. I mean, we're all, handling the same problems, just in a little bit different of sports, but, we all work with the same people and work through the same problems. So I think we share resources, pretty good. And just like, hey, I saw you made this, nice official visit recruiting lanyard. Can I borrow it, or can I, edit it? And it's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So, trying to divide tasks and like, hey, everyone's borrowing from other people. So how can we best utilize what other, programs within our university have done, and how can we, utilize it for ours?
As far as scheduling, let's talk scheduling here for a second. I'm sure, I'm guessing Dayton, you're not or Denton, you're not the end all be all on the schedule, but
Hmm.
I'm sure there's a committee involved there. Obviously, the other Big Ten teams. Um, let's use that LSU example again. How did you guys land? When you look at the whole operation, we want to get a big SEC team on our schedule.
Hmm.
How do you land that to open up the season? And what are the
Yeah.
processes involved there?
Yeah, so it's honestly, scheduling is kind of a monster. It's a bear. It's a big deal. So I work closely, obviously, with Jeff, our head coach, and he kind of outlines what kind of strategy he wants to go with for each year. Like, do we want to go, what's the type of format? A lot of it comes down to, what types of locations do we want to be in? What types of venues do we want to be in? Kind of what's the landscape of our team? Like, what's our projected, skill level, or like, where do we think we'll be competitive? What type, of culture do we want to build in the places we go to? So I'll kind of take that and then start to email operations people at different schools, or different head coaches, and just kind of get a feel for, if they're interested in scheduling, and how we can make it work. And a lot of it comes from our coaches having relationships with other coaching staffs, or just, me having relationships with other operations people, and knowing who has an opening, or who would want to play us, who would be a good fit, what brand of baseball do we want to play against, what type of environment, what type of venue, those types of things. But it's crazy because, like, right now we're 3 to 4 years out scheduling. So people think it's like I'm scheduling for next year. It's like, no, that schedule's done. Next year's schedule's done. It's like 2 year schedule's done. You're scheduling pretty far out, when you get to this level. So yeah, it's fun. It's interesting. It's pretty cool to kind of see, what the outlook of your schedule could be like, and have an influence on that.
Any, as far as what you can announce, I know some of the schedules may not be released yet. I haven't looked in the future, but as far as, you may keep some of this under wraps, but anything that's out in the open, who are some of the teams that or are there any teams that IU doesn't traditionally play year by year that we can see on the horizon going forward?
I probably can't talk about our future schedules. I wish I could. But yeah, I would say, like, because a lot of it, when we came in, we inherited the prior scheduling of the
Mhm.
prior staff. So even this year, this was basically all scheduled by the prior staff. So we're just now kind of getting our hands on the scheduling for what our teams are actually going to play. Um, but yeah, we should have some pretty good opponents, in the near future.
I tried, folks, but hats off to you. You held your ground there, coach. So as we migrate into the let's just call it the science part of your job, and
Hmm.
or the technology, as we talk about the analytics,
Hmm.
and some of this other technology. um, you know there's really the components kind of interplay, because one of the things I'm reading on the site here: video breakdown and managing the role of analytics. I'm
Hmm.
guessing that the video breakdown and the analytics tie into each other, either directly through programming or through the your great mind of analyzing it. But let's talk about the analytics role itself. What stats, what are patterns, you're looking for? What trends? What are some of the things, the analytics that you're evaluating for IU?
Yeah, so I always start with people ask kind of they see the pitching development and operations, and that's not, I guess, that common. So I basically split my time in half. Um, I'll resource wise, like half of it is basically operations, and half of it is on the player development or pitching development side, which is where the analytics come in. And that's not saying like of an 8 hour day that 4 hours are spent there. It's more like you know an extended amount of time that it ends up being almost 8 hours for each, but that's just what's required. So but on the analytics side, we're extremely blessed to have a lot of the best technologies in the game here at IU. It's a great resource. We're able to have a lot of those and utilize those, and it really helps. It just springboards our player development to a great level. So with the analytics, our TrackMan system is what we use on the field. So that's similar to what's in it's the same as what's in Major League Baseball stadiums throughout the country. It's a component of StatCast. So we have TrackMan that kind of gives us our in-game feedback of pitchers, their spin rates, their horizontal and vertical break, those types of things on their pitches. So we'll be able to, diagnose, hey, like, this type of spin, your curveball profile is this. We'd like to get it to this. Its current spin axis is this. This is how it's spinning. Then we can look at guys either at the major league level or even at the college level that are having a lot of success and saying, I think we could, make these tweaks, and then we could change your pitch to mimic this or to do this, and it would be more effective. Or we see that a curveball with this type of action has a lot of success at the college level. Let's try to see if we can make some changes to your pitch to be able to take advantage of that. On the hitting side, it gives you exit velocity, launch angle, horizontal launch angle, those types of things. So we can say, hey, like, you hit the ball really well when it's thrown in this quadrant of the plate, but you don't when it's in this quadrant of the plate. So obviously you're going to get pitched there a lot where you really struggle. So then we can give that information to our hitting coach, Jeff Mercer, and be like, hey, this is an issue and this is where he's going to get attacked based off the data. And then he can go into the player or the coaching setting and be like, this is the adjustments we need to make with our hitters. So that's why it's just, all those things used to be seen by, a coach's eye or whatever, but it's now we have thousands of data points to prove our point. And it makes the communication with the players so much easier because it's like, it's not my opinion. I'm just telling you, this is what 1,000 data points of data say that you really struggle with. And that, especially at the next level, when advanced scouting is even higher, you are going to get pounded by this pitch in the zone. We need to work on how we best utilize that, how we best, adjust your swing or adjust your approach to be able to handle that pitch. And same on the pitching side.
Well, and you're getting with these programs, and I've never used these programs, and that's kind of what I want to dig into them a little bit bigger because they're just so interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting tons of data, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not a program where you just say hit F2 to tell me this person's weak point.
Right.
You're analyzing that data and compiling it and looking at it from
Mm-hmm.
different vantage points to try to understand those trends.
Right.
So visualize that for us. You've got the video component where you can visualize it, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that backs up the data. You can use that to back up the data. But the data itself, so you're looking at spin rates, you're looking at velocity, pitcher wise, but also
Mm-hmm.
batter wise, the zones,
Yep.
what they're hitting, what they're not.
Mm-hmm.
Take me through, and it's the stuff can get really complex, and it's even hard to formulate a question sometimes for a hat guy. But as we look at it, how do you help us visualize what you're looking at and how to present it in a way that it commands attention, and for any type of stat. How do you compile the data? Tell me about TrackMan, I guess, or Rapsodo.
Yeah.
How are you looking at the data? Is it just spreadsheets of data that you're compiling, or give us just a kind of a general view of
Mm-hmm.
that? If you're just looking at numbers, or
Yeah, I'll use a kind of an example on the hitting side, just for an example. So think of like if you've watched a major league game, you've seen like a heat map of the strike zone, right? So like the strike zone as a box, and different quadrants are lit up by different colors. So for our hitters, we'll look at, hey, so this is your first 4 weekends of the year. You have a really high exit velocity, which is represented by a warmer color, normally red, orange, whatever. A really high exit velocity in these parts of the zone. So let's say the inner third of the plate, but you have a really low exit velocity on balls put in play on the outer half of the zone. So, that's a very, very basic example of what we would do, but it's like that to the player shows like, okay. And then you look at how many pitches you're getting in those zones and how many times you're swinging at pitches in those zones. And it's like, so if you don't hit the pitch on the outside third of the plate very well, if you don't hit that very well and you're getting thrown and swinging at that pitch a lot, that's going to result in you not having success on the field. So in that example, on pitches on the outer third of the zone, you either have to not swing at them because you don't hit them well and just lay off of those pitches, or you have to learn to hit that pitch better. Like there's one of two ways you have to go. So it doesn't mean we have to train you to hit that pitch on the outside third of the plate, but it means that you can't swing at it, because every time you swing at it, you don't hit it well. You hit it with, a really low launch angle and a really, even moderate velocity is a ground ball. Ground balls are outs. Ground balls are outs at this level and at the professional level. So I guess that's one example.
I'll tell you, I could talk about this stuff all day. It's so interesting to me. So let's talk about the data set. To what constitutes a trend. So I guess the question would be, how frequently are you looking at the analytics? How frequently are you looking at the data? And this is kind of general, scenario based. Different scenarios call for more frequent reporting, I would assume. And probably different coaching philosophies have different
right
demands. But how frequently are you going to the coach saying, okay, here we definitely have a trend here? Or do they want, I want a last 5 games trend, and then I want a 6-month trend or something like that?
Right.
What's the repetitiveness of it?
I think on the pitching side, it's probably a little bit easier for each pitcher, depending on if they're a starter or a reliever, just because you have more pitches available to you in that data set. On the hitting side, we're very cognizant of that. It's like, it's easy to be like, look at a guy's heat map and say, oh man, he hit the ball like in the top third of the zone, 110 miles an hour. It's like, that was one pitch. So you have to be cognizant of the end value of your data set, right? Like how many pieces of data do you have in that zone? So, on the hitting side, we normally wait a little bit longer. Maybe it's one series if the guy saw a lot of pitches. Maybe it's a couple of weekends. But on the pitching side, we'll do a post-game report from the TrackMan data of each pitcher, in which kind of gives a good summary. If he threw 50 fastballs, 30 breaking balls, and 20 changeups, we can probably get a good estimate, at least of like breaks and spin rates and those types of things on those pitches, and where he was throwing them in the zone, where they were effective, what pitches hitters swung and missed against him with, what his velocity ranges on where pitches. We can probably get a better idea on the pitching side just because you have so many more data points, especially for a starting pitcher.
And you can probably, and again, this is an assumption, just thinking this as hearing what you're saying, you could probably pick up a little bit to identify if the opposing team is using analytics as well. Because if you have a trend where a batter just will not lay off that low and outside fastball and ends up doinking it down the first base line every time for 2 years straight, and their pitcher does not pitch him there, you're probably thinking they're not using analytics. So,
they're either not using analytics or their pitcher doesn't know where the ball's going. So I guess it's sometimes, hopefully at this level, that's not an issue, but they're always cognizant of it's easy to, to make a game plan, but then it's the player's job. That's why, they're obviously the players, and that's why it's a very difficult job what they do. It's difficult to execute it. You can outline the best game plan ever, but it comes out to going out and executing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's look at, as we kind of wrap things up, let's look at your position from a career standpoint looking forward. If you're talking to a high school kid, college kid that wants to get into analytics, or some of the administrative operational side of baseball, both, let's look at a career standpoint as far as opportunity, as far as, where it's heading, the technology. Let's start with that technology looking forward. what are some of the resources you look to stay on top of the game, to, because it is the science of baseball is number one, becoming, it's improving every day, but number two, it's
Hmm.
becoming more available. It's not just the big schools in the future that may have access to it, maybe others will. So what do you use? What are some of the things you look to stay ahead of the game?
I would say Fangraphs has probably been one of the most influential websites for me in my career in terms of baseball analysis, baseball analytics. It's a great resource. I would say anyone that wants to get in the field should go to Fangraphs. Um, there's just a lot of great content. There's so many great articles that have influenced my career that's the number one place I would go. I also think Baseball Savant is another one. You can get a lot of StatCast data from professional baseball games in that, and that's where you can kind of tie in doing your own type of work on your own. You can download or look at StatCast data on Baseball Savant, and you can do your own analysis. Like you don't need to be working with a major league team or in college baseball to be doing your own analysis. So that's another one I would look at. And then I think Driveline Baseball has been a huge influence in my career. Their blog is unbelievable, and we use a lot of their products here, and they've been great. They're kind of the trendsetters in terms of like data-driven player development currently going on in the game. So I would definitely check out their blog, their research site. They have a ton of great resources for anyone just trying to learn more about how advanced analytics or advanced, player development is going on within the game right now.
Well, I'll tell you there, and I appreciate you highlighting a few there from an insider view, because there are, from an outside looking in, I would be flooded with everybody saying, this is what you got to do.
Hmm.
Here's the information you need. We are the resource. So that's good to hear,
Hmm.
some
Yeah.
of professional opinion for what resources you use. What about people? Looking forward, who are some of the people that you kind of keep your eye on what they're doing? Maybe, the industry has some standard technologies and things like that, but there's always somebody that's pushing the trend, pushing the technology. Are there any companies or people that you kind of keep an eye on them because they really have a pulse? They have a finger on the pulse of the industry and the technology, and you kind of want to, if they're doing it, I need to pay attention.
Yeah, and I think it starts again with Kyle Bodie and Driveline Baseball kind of has started that trend 10 years ago, and is still pushing that kind of envelope forward. So he's one I always follow and always check in with, have a relationship with the Driveline staff. They're great. Eugene Bleakler with 108 Performance out in California is a great resource. And then, Lance Wheeler with Core Velocity Belt is a great resource as well. So those are more on the pitching side. Those guys are all doing phenomenal things. With data technology, all that stuff, and just general player development. Just talking baseball, they're great Twitter follows. So kind of pushing the game forward and doing that kind of stuff. So they're great resources. Another thing I forgot to mention, people ask me with the engineering background, kind of like how do you make that fit a lot? But I think every kid in high school should learn basic coding. It's something I had to do. It's going to be more prevalent in the future, not just in baseball, but just in general careers. It kind of helps stimulate that problem solving capability in a new age frame. So it's really easy to learn. I mean, you can download R, SQL, like you can Python, you can do it in whatever format you want to do it in. A lot of high schools are teaching that already, but there's so many free resources out there online to learn that, and that'd be a huge resource to getting into the analytics in college or professional baseball.
Well, I'll second that. I mean, just the logic, the concept of logic, even that
Hmm.
you pick up from learning programming. It's programming is it's ones and zeros. When it comes down to it, obviously not
Yeah.
programming level. So it's that if I don't program this in here, it doesn't happen. Um,
Hmm.
so let's talk about that maybe a little bit. Are there any with what you do, you have the programs
Hmm.
that do a lot of the computation that you tell it to do, but is there any core raw programming that you've ever in your career had to utilize within the baseball framework?
Yeah, so that was the main part of my job in engineering. So I do have a pretty extensive coding background. So with that, I like to take the raw data from all of the technology tools and use and do the data interpretation
Mhm.
myself in my own program. I don't every different technology is trying to be proprietary and they don't talk to each other. It's like you have to have like 8 different skill sets to view each different type of technology. So I just take the raw data and then combine it myself and utilize it so it's all in one place. I think that's a skill I picked up in engineering that I think is just beneficial. And to be honest, once you learn one programming language, you kind of know the general framework and you can learn a different one pretty easily. So I'm currently using R Studio. So that's just one that is pretty prevalent within the game of baseball that I think I would probably maybe start with if you really want to get a baseball focused experience. But yeah, I would rather know what's going on behind the curtain than them just giving me a number that I don't necessarily know what's going on with it. So, but getting back to the people too, I think with the analytics stuff and people coming in through high school, we have a great student manager program here. So that's another way that people can get involved. Contact the coach even at your high school or where you're going to go to college and just be like, hey, can I help out? Can I here's what I've done. Can I help out? Or we have a great student manager program. They do a lot of the data acquisition for us. When I do more of the analysis, they do a lot of the actual collection of the data. So that's a great resource to get involved if you don't know where to start. Just start with your high school coach or where you're going to project to go to college. So just reach out and see if they need any help because those people are hugely beneficial to our program. Our program couldn't run without our student managers.
Well, I'll tell you, and going with what you're saying there, I'll second this again, because if you're a person, that wants to get into this and you're in college, you're starting to do the studying, going back to what you said at the very beginning, find a problem now and try to figure out a solution for it. I guarantee you, if you're a college student right now, every high school around your college would love to see your data, love to see any kind of analysis that you could provide them. Their high school coaches, their resources are very minimal. Whether they can use it or not, that's situational, but they're going to want to see the data and they're going to be appreciative of you, doing the work to give them that data. So another great point there.
And I really don't think that like in a misconception is that you need all of our advanced technology to have like a data driven program or whatever. When I was in high school and I didn't have access to all this, I was coaching at high school. We used a radar gun in an Excel document. Like it wasn't like you don't need all of this stuff. It doesn't expand exponentially. Like it's like you don't get more because you just have more technology. It's all about how you're using it with the players. And that can be as simple as a radar gun on a tripod with an Excel sheet and one student manager at the high school level. And it's being like, hey, we make these adjustments in his swing and like we monitor his exit velocity, or we see how his exit velocity changes per field that he hits or where the ball's thrown in the plate. A student manager can easily chart from behind home plate where the ball is that are being thrown to that team's hitters and how they do with that pitch. It's like you don't need all this advanced technology to be able to start somewhere and get benefit out of it. So, and that's what my second point is, just as you have all this technology and all these analytics and all these tools, it always comes back to how it relates to the coaches and the players. So if I don't communicate that technology and that data and all that stuff in a clear way that they can make actionable changes, it doesn't mean anything. Like measuring something just because you can measure it isn't valuable. You need to measure it because it matters. So if it doesn't matter, don't worry about just measuring everything you can. And that's, a problem that I see a lot in the industry. So as a side note.
Well, I'll tell you, the 2 words of all the great information that you're providing here, 2 words that stuck out to me there that in the last bit you just gave, which is start somewhere. Those 2 words right there kind of summarize, not everybody's going to be able to have the TrackMan and the Rapsodo and all the technology, video equipment, and everything else. Start somewhere. And, and tell me if I'm not summarizing this correctly, but, get the education, learn about the tools, learn about, stay on top of the industry trends and technology and things like that. But like you said, you take the data and then you massage it your own way and with your own programming. So don't limit yourself to the technology. Don't limit yourself to what technology you can afford now. Start somewhere and then find a way to find the data and then find out if it's meaningful. And then find a way to report it. But, all of this summarizes it greatly. I really appreciate it. Maybe just as we wrap things up, looking forward,
Hmm.
analytics aren't going anywhere. What do you see career standpoint, career opportunity? Everything from the big leagues down to maybe, do you see it seeping into the high school at a greater level? What's the opportunity career wise for analytics or for, the administrative operational side of baseball?
Yeah, you're right, Dan. There's analytics aren't going anywhere. So people need to get accustomed to having that as part of their player development model. And I think the resistance happens when people are making decisions solely based on analytics, when before there weren't analytics at all. And it's like the old school versus new school kind of mentality. And that, I don't think it has to be like that. There needs to be a harmony between the two, because the old school coaches, they knew what was right. Like, they saw it with their eyes. Now we just have the data to back up what they were already teaching, and just be able to find that, make that feedback loop to the players and the coaches quicker. That's all we're doing, is making the feedback loop quicker. We're making changes quicker. Player development is happening at a faster pace, at a more efficient pace. So yeah, analytics aren't going anywhere. I expect them to trickle down to the high school level. I know there's some high school programs that are getting a TrackMan unit at their field. A lot of them have Rapsodo. It's definitely transitioning down, all the way down the levels into the private sector as well, with youth baseball organizations. I think it's great. I think it's a great, it's an awesome opportunity. I just, people need to make sure they're using it properly, and saying, like, this is an evaluation tool that doesn't replace coaching. You still have to coach. I provide data to our coaches to help make them better coaches. It is not to replace them as coaches. The data is only as good as the coach communicating it to him, to the player. So it enhances the coach's toolbox. It doesn't downgrade the use of a coach. So it's definitely going to trickle in. It's going to be more prevalent at every single level going forward. But it only enhances the role as a coach. It doesn't diminish it.
Well, and the good side of that is the human element. You can't get rid of it. Obviously you can't
Yep.
get rid of it on the field. Like you said earlier,
Yep.
they may have all the analytics in the world, but if that pitcher can't hit that low, that low and away
Yep.
corner,
Yep.
analytics don't matter. The human
Right.
element is always going to be there. And it's, people like you, Denton, I really appreciate you joining us today. I think you really gave us a great visual of the scope of not only the operational and, the administrative side of behind the scenes for a big time program like IU, and some takeaways that even coaches can take away at high schools. Some of the
Hmm.
things we're talking about. Great analysis of what all's involved on the analytical side of baseball. So I really appreciate it. I think this has been a really functional look at your career as director of baseball operations at IU. Folks, we're with Denton Sagerman. Like I said, the director of baseball operations, but like me, he wears a lot of hats. Thank you, sir. Folks, follow us in the future. We got more careers that we're going to cover as we cross the state. Thanks again.